She was screaming at my gate before the sun even cleared the trees, waving a $3,000 fine like it was a trophy, ordering me to open up as if she owned my bloodline and my breakfast. I was still holding my coffee, staring out over the same land my family had worked since 1952, and somehow just saying no turned me into the villain. I wasn't even part of her damned HOA, but in her mind I was the problem that had to be crushed. Her name was Malene Pierce, red blazer, like armor clipboard like a weapon, and two board members trailing behind her who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. She marched straight to my fence like she'd been rehearsing this scene for weeks. "Mr. Carter, I require immediate access for compliance inspection," she barked with that special bureaucrat tone people use when they think titles equal power. I raised my thermos with a polite smile, told her she could inspect all she wanted from the county road, but my property wasn't hers to barge into. She flushed. Red fumbled papers thrust a fine through the bars. Unauthorized agricultural use, failure to meet aesthetic standards. Big words, zero evidence. I glanced at the notice, looked official, but missing every real piece of legal footing. No photos, no clear citations, just a fat $3,000 number. I said I'd review it with counsel. She didn't like that. Pulled out her measuring tape, started sizing up my fence posts like she was going to redraw the county map herself. That's when I called Sheriff Mark Lewis. He'd been through HOA hell himself years back, so when he pulled up and looked at the paperwork, he shook his head. "Ma'am, you can't demand access to private property without owner consent or a court order." Her confidence cracked right there, but she wasn't done. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't over, it was just warming up. Days later, I found the survey stakes along my boundary line kicked crooked, disturbed, like some midnight animal had gone after them. But the only animal around here wearing red lipstick and a blazer was Malene. And then came the chain. Heavy links stretched across my access road padlocks, gleaming in the sun signs posted, claiming emergency safety closure by HOA order. That blockade cut off my cattle feed deliveries, my vet's truck, even fire access. By noon, 2,000 pounds of feed sat rotting at the supplier every hour, costing me money. My cattle pressed against the fence, bawling in confusion, 30 pairs of eyes staring at me like I'd failed them. That was the first time I thought maybe she'd already won. I sat at my kitchen table, fine notices piled up like threats cattle, crying in the distance, wondering if maybe I was the fool here. Was I just stubborn, clinging to some outdated pride while the world changed around me? Selling the ranch crossed my mind. Walking away. I could feel my late wife's picture watching from the wall, and for a moment I hated myself for not knowing what to do. But then I thought about my grandfather's hands, how he drove those survey stakes in 1952, how he picked that oak tree as a permanent marker. He'd carved our place into county records with ink that outlasts liars. I wasn't just fighting for me. I was standing for 3 generations of Carters who worked this land honest. That thought pulled me out of the hole. I drove straight to the courthouse. The dusty deed books told the truth. My family bought this land decades before the subdivision granted easements to the county, only not a word about HOAs. The entrance pillars and mailbox cluster that subdivision bragged about, built right on my land without permission. That wasn't aesthetic standards, that was trespass. And I wasn't alone. Rebecca Shaw, the CPA from down the street, showed up with folders of bank records. She'd been quietly tracking every irregularity for months. Unauthorized spending, missing board votes, forged signatures. $90,000 unaccounted for projects greenlit with no authority. She said, "Wes, this isn't just your fight. She's been bleeding all of us." Sheriff Lewis gathered my footage, infrared cameras, catching a figure in red yanking out survey markers at 2 a.m. Clear evidence tampering. Meanwhile, neighbors started whispering their own stories. Fines for flower colors, playground sets ripped out, decks threatened despite county permits. One by one the picture sharpened. This wasn't about order, it was about control. When the board finally called an emergency meeting, the community center felt like a courtroom. The county mediator sat, tall attorneys flanking both sides, a court reporter tapping each word. Malene strutted in with her red blazer, acting like she still held the cards. She spread out expired city compliance certificates, trying to pass them as authority. The mediator raised his brows, said calmly, "Miss Pierce, these expired years ago. You have no current qualifications for this work." That was the first crack. Then Tom Wilson, usually quiet as a mouse, stood up trembling with a manila folder. 8 months of records, unauthorized expenditures, altered minutes, forged votes. His voice grew stronger with every page. Rebecca followed with her accounting breakdown, line after line of violations, $90,000 misspent under Malene's so-called leadership. The room shifted. Residents stood up telling their own horror stories. A woman sobbing about $2,000 in fines for flower beds. A father explaining how his kids lost their playground. The weight of her cruelty crashed down in voices she couldn't silence. The mediator's words cut like a gavel. "Miss Pierce, based on the overwhelming evidence, you have exceeded your authority and violated both governing documents and state law. This board must vote on your removal." 3 hands shot up in favor, 2 hesitant but enough to strip her position. Malene shot to her feet, shouting, "I don't accept this. You people don't understand. I'm the only one with real experience." Her voice cracked. Chair clattering behind her, but the spell was broken. Nobody believed her anymore. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just walked out into the night air, the oak tree silhouetted against the stars, and finally let myself breathe. She'd tried to break me with fines, chains, and lies, but the truth old deeds, iron stakes, neighbors finding courage brought her down. And if there's one thing I learned standing at that gate, it's this: bullies collapse the moment you stop playing by their rules.